get started, my name is Rocio Casillas. I work for the Illinois State Board of Education, Special Education Department. I'm a principal consultant. I help oversee all of the districts, but I do mainly work with the Chicago Public School District, so if that's where your students go, I might have a little bit more information, but I do have general information for all districts across the state. I hope you guys had a good lunch and are ready to start the afternoon sessions. We'll save questions for the end, but if you have a really, really important question, I can go ahead and give you the mic and we can get that answered for you, okay? So our agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about the rights that you have as a parent, federal and state law that cover students with special education. We'll talk about the IEP process, and then we'll go ahead and go over some acronyms that are important for you to know, and then we'll do a question and answer session at the end. If I'm talking too fast, please let me know, because I normally talk really, really fast. So some of your rights. As a parent, you have a right to, your child has the right to receive free and appropriate public education. You have the right to request an evaluation to receive special education services and supports. The district must provide you with timely notification about any changes to your student services or any meetings about your child's education. Your consent must be provided for certain actions to take place by the school district, and we'll go over all the things that you need to give consent for later slide. You have the right to participate meaningfully in the IEP process, including getting translation and interpretation supports. You may also voice your disagreement, so if you don't agree with something that the school district is doing, you have the right to speak up and to seek dispute resolution. Your student has the right to receive compensatory services if the district does not provide the services and supports to your student. You should receive updates about your child's progress throughout the whole school year, so you have the right to that. Your child should be in the general education classroom as much as possible throughout the day and has the right to be with his general education peers. And you have the right to request any and all copies of all your students' records and documents. So these are just some of the federal and state laws that cover your child's education. So the top ones are the ones that are across the country, and these are specific to of Illinois. So if you guys want to get that information and look those up on your own time, but the IDEA is one of the most important ones that you guys should be familiar with. All right, so the IEPs, the Individualized Education Plans. Just raise your hand, how many of your students already have an IEP? Okay, so most of you guys. Oh, sorry about that. Okay, so some of you guys may have an IEP and some of you guys may have a 504. So they are two different things. A 504 covers if a student has a mental or physical impairment, and if that physical or mental impairment limits the child in one or more major life activities. And so those are it's not the same as an IEP, and we don't, the State Board of Education doesn't handle 504s. An IEP is if the child meets one or more of the 14 defined disability categories, and if it adversely impacts their educational performance. So these are the 14 disability categories: autism, deafblindness, developmental delay, emotional disability, hearing impairment, and all the way down. So if your student has one or more of these, they would qualify for an IEP. If your student has a 504 and you have a complaint or concern or need more information, this is going to be the contact information. The Illinois State Board of Education doesn't take those concerns, so you would have to go to this office. So I'll give you guys a couple more seconds. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk about the IEP process. We'll start all the way at the beginning. If your student doesn't have an IEP, you can make a request to determine, for the district to determine the child's eligibility for special education. The district has 14 school days to decide if they want to continue with an evaluation. The district can say no, based off of any data or observations that they have. If the district does determine that they want to continue with an evaluation, they will determine which domains will be evaluated and then get your consent. The evaluation cannot start until you as a parent provide written consent that it can begin. After that, the school has 60 school days from when you give written consent to conduct an evaluation. It's important to note that if your student is an English learner and English is not their primary language, they have a right to be evaluated in their native language. Okay, so now you gave consent. The school has 60 school days to take the steps needed to complete the evaluation. After that, on the 60th school day, or on the first day of the following school year, if there wasn't enough days left, they have to conduct an eligibility meeting with you. Here they'll determine if the child is eligible for special education or not. Again, they can decide that the student probably may not need it, but if they do need it, then the team will meet with you to develop an IEP. At the IEP meeting, you'll determine initial services, and then again, you have to provide written consent for those services to start. Placement then begins no sooner than 10 days of the completed IEP, unless you give consent that it can start earlier. So the IEP team. These are going to be the people that you'll be meeting with. Depending on your students' services, there may be more people involved, but these are going to be the general team. So it's going to be you. You're one of the most important people on the team. Your student, after they reach a certain age, they must be invited, and if they would like to attend, they'll be part of the team. Their general education teacher, a special education teacher, a local school district representative, which sometimes is the case manager, and any related service providers. So if they receive occupational therapy, social work, speech, things like that, they'll be at the IEP meeting. Okay, so earlier we talked about things that you need to give consent. So the school cannot do these things unless you give written consent. So the initial evaluation, to get re-evaluated, to begin the initial special education and related services, mutual and written agreement to extend the evaluation timeline, so if they need more than 60 days for the evaluation, an excusal of an IEP team member. Sometimes not everyone can attend an IEP meeting, and you have to give permission that it's okay to continue the meeting without them. And usually if you agree, they'll provide all the information to the team, so you have it at the meeting. And then consent to release your child's records to a third party. So the district cannot release your student's records to a third party unless you give consent. Okay, so there's two important pieces in an IEP that you should be asking questions about and making sure that it's written in the IEP. So the parent concerns, they're always going to ask you, do you have any concerns at the time? When I review IEPs, a lot of the time the parents are like, no, like everything's okay. But it's really important to say whatever you're thinking, any questions that you have, make sure that they're noted in the parent concerns. So talking about how they function at home versus school, if you have any concerns about that. If you notice any strengths that the school team hasn't noticed, make sure they put it in there. Any issues that are impacting learning. So if there's if there's personal family stuff going on, it's important for the team to know that and to have record that this could be affecting the student at this time. At the end, there's also an IEP notes section, and a lot of times this is empty, and it shouldn't be empty. This is where you should be asking, again, any questions that you have about the placement. If you disagree with anything, you say, I don't want my student to be doing this or that, this is where that should be noted. They're part of the IEP, and you should always get a copy of it, and it should never be blank. So if it's blank, you need to go back and make sure that they're noting what really happened at the IEP. All right, interpreters and translated documents. If English is not your primary language and your child is an English learner, you have the right to get all the IEP documents in your native language. So that's the procedural safeguards. All the draft IEPs that you get before a meeting, those should be in your native language. IEP documents, the waivers, all the consent forms that you sign should be in your language. You also have a right to have a qualified bilingual specialist or a teacher as part of the IEP team when needed to make sure that we're understanding your child's language and cultural factors and how that affects their education. And you also have the right to get interpretation services at an eligibility IEP meeting, and any due process. Like if you disagree with the IEP team and you take it to due process, you have a right to have an interpreter at that meeting. So these are some of the important acronyms that you'll see a lot. I'll give you guys a chance to take a picture, but some of the ones that are really, really important are always going to be IEP, FAPE. They'll use that a lot. They'll just say FAPE. It just means that free, appropriate public education. If your student has behavioral issues, you'll hear BIP and FBA a lot. So a BIP is just the plan for their behavioral issues, and a functional behavioral analysis is the process that they have in order to make that behavior intervention plan. And then ISB, if you ever need to contact us, that's where I work at, so that's the acronym down there. QR code will take you to our website for parent information, so I'll give you guys a chance to scan that. And then my email and office number is going to be there. That last email is for the whole special education department, but if you want to get in touch with me personally, that's my email right there. I know that was kind of fast. Does anyone have any questions? If I can share it, yes, I can share it. I'll see with the conference, the people who hosted the conference, I'll give it to them and they can share it out to you guys. You have a question? Here.
Good afternoon. My question is about the school, regular school, they provide like music, art, gym, and all these classes.
Mm-hmm.
But for our special need kids, I don't know if this is legal or not, but the assistant principal told us and we want extra like music class, so we need to look for in our own, so they don't provide those classes to our kiddos. And I think, for example, music is, in my experience, I'm a music teacher. I know music helps a lot to develop. Mm-hmm. And for example, I have expressed my points to them because also as a parent in an IEP, they don't accept our opinions. They said the parents are part of a main part also in the IEP. But in any of the IEPs, I have heard and people said, oh, as parents, I think this is something good, then you are bringing it out. So we can follow up. So I just know how legal it is because it's so sad that they don't provide those extra classes that I think our kids need. And for example, art is not really an art class. It's just like they are cutting or using still like very basic skills for kindergarten. For example, when we have already kids in high school or kids that are going high school. So I don't know how exactly that information it is because I was kind of down when they told me if you need music for your kids, you need to look for outside because the school district doesn't provide those services for your special need kids.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So if your district has music and elective classes like art and gym, they should be allowing students with special needs to be in those classes, even if that means having accommodations, maybe a paraprofessional, but they shouldn't be excluding them from having elective classes. Can I ask what district?
Plainfield District 202.
Okay.
When my kid was in middle school, the assistant principal said to us, if you need to look for those type of classes, go find outside, because we don't provide this for special kids. Like when he was in elementary school, he used to have music. Mm-hmm. But I feel like 3 years
Yeah.
and they don't have the access. And that was a really sad question. Like, if you need it, go look for outside because the school don't provide it.
No, the school should still be providing and allowing kids with special needs and on IEPs to have access to those elective classes. So if a parent wanted to file a state complaint, they can do that on our website because that they should be able to attend those elective classes. Yep.
Mi pregunta es, por ejemplo, en mi distrito, que es el 87,
Ujú.
en las escuelas de pre-kinder, mi hijo es autista y lo tuvieron que mandar a otro, por ejemplo, yo soy de Norley, a Maywood y viajo diario para allá y porque no tienen para niños como mi hijo en esa escuela de mi comunidad. Y ahí, ¿qué es lo que procedería, no?
Did everyone get that question? No. So she's her student has autism. Is at they're in one district, but he's now going to another school district to receive services. And so that happens sometimes if the school district doesn't have the resources, they can outplace to a different district, maybe a therapeutic day school. But they should be providing your school district should be providing transportation since they're taking you to another school in another district, they should be allowing you to have access to transportation. So you shouldn't be taking him every day. Yeah, does that answer your question? Sí. It's because sometimes the district doesn't have the resources that your student may need. He may need some things that they don't have. And so in order to have free and appropriate education, they're sending him to another school that has the resources and services for your student. So it is possible. So that does happen a lot if the school district doesn't have what he needs. Yeah. But if you don't want that, you can say that you don't want him to go to another school district. He just may not get the services that he should be getting. Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Question?
I have a question. For example, when your kid is eligible for a dedicated SICA,
Mm-hmm.
so that means that the SICA is just with him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what can I do if they are using that SICA for another 3 or 4 kids?
Okay, so SICA in Chicago Public School is just another name for a paraprofessional. So her student should have a dedicated paraprofessional, a one-to-one. So you should go first to your administration. So if you've already talked to your principal, your assistant principal, and it's still happening, do you know the name of your district representative? I can help you look that up later. So CPS has a district representative. You would file your concerns with them. And if it's still not changing, then you would file a state complaint with the state. And then to make sure that he's getting his minutes with his dedicated one-to-one. Because your dedicated one-to-one should not be helping with lunch, should not be helping with recess, should not be helping other students. They're not there to babysit other kids in the classroom. They're there for your student. If it's a shared paraprofessional or SICA, that might be a little bit different. It just depends on how it's written in the IEP. But a dedicated one cannot be with anyone but your student.
Okay. ¿Alguien más va?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just have another question.
Mm-hmm.
My son is in a therapeutic school right now. Just want to know, they don't let us allow as parents to go and observe him. I know in the district, they used to let us go and observe for 5-10 minutes. And this is something that we have been asking why they don't let us go and observe. And our district doesn't have the control of that because this is an outside placement.
Mm-hmm.
So they have been telling me that they work with the FDI, el para niños,
Okay. DCFS?
DCFS, yeah. So they said then they protect, it's for the privacy of the other kids who has a different diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
But when you see that your kid is getting bites and they don't give information, and And we have been trying to knock the door, and I said, okay, we can observe, someone else can come, and they don't let us, bring people to observe. So this is correct, because this is a different organization, therapeutic school, and they said they have their own policies, and that's what they follow. But I just feel like this is, I don't think this is right. And parents, we can have 5 minutes. We are not going there to judge what other kids' disabilities have. We just want to be there, what's going on, what is the behavior, because sometimes they complain about behaviors, and then you don't know exactly, at least then they can allow us to observe 5-10 minutes. It's how we can get an authorization or something as parents, so they can open their door to us to observe.
So unfortunately, all schools, all districts, and therapeutic day schools make their own policies when it comes to things like that. So if they don't allow, if it's their policy to not have parents come in, that's not something that the state can go in and have them change it. I would suggest maybe getting an advocate, or going through dispute matters to see if this is something that you can, if it's not changing. Just unfortunately, that's not something that we can have a say in. If those are their policies, then that's what we have to respect. And some school districts also have a policy that doesn't allow parents to come in. So it doesn't really mean just because it's a therapeutic day. It's just depending on the district. Yeah. There is a question back there.
That happened because after the pandemic,
Yeah, a lot of things changed.
Sí, buenas tardes. Yo nada más quería preguntar, o si me puede ayudar, ¿verdad? Como si un niño con una educación especial lo pudieron haber reprobado en el año de la pandemia, con educación especial, aparte de eso, con ahora problemas médicos, sí es verdad, ¿verdad? Que lo tenían que reprobar en ese año y ahora lo están haciendo pagar para este verano las materias reprobadas.
Okay, did everybody get that question? So she has a student in special education who failed during the pandemic. ¿Puede repetir su pregunta?
Es que sí es verdad que pueden reprobar a un niño durante la pandemia con una educación especial, ahora con problemas médicos. Sí es verdad que lo podían haber hecho reprobar materias y hacerlo pagar ahora en este verano.
Okay.
Ni siquiera en el de la pandemia, en este verano.
Okay, so she's saying, is it okay that a school failed a student with special needs during the pandemic and is now having them make it up this summer, not even the summer right after the pandemic? So your student is from CPS or no? Sí. Okay, so that's a little bit different. Their recovery services, some districts started doing that after the pandemic, having recovery services. So if a student was failing or they were just losing progression in their goals, they created recovery services after the pandemic to make up for the loss. CPS started theirs really late, and so that's why they're not doing their recovery services until now. So they didn't have recovery services immediately after the pandemic. So if your student was failing or losing progression in their goals, they could be having them make up for it now with recovery services. But are you saying that he's going to extended school year? If you want, I can. That's a really unique question because it is CPS, so we can talk about it after. Yeah. Yeah. Can you pass? Yeah. Thank you.
My question is, when the student finishes high school, this program is followed to the college or?
IEPs? No. So after high school and they go to college, all universities have like a disability resource center, and they can get accommodations for their classes, but they don't have an IEP anymore. They don't have IEP meetings or anything like that. But if your student is going to college or university, I recommend looking into their disability resource center. Sometimes they're named different, but they assist with accommodations and creating like a different kind of plan for the student to be successful. Do you have a question?
My name is Anna. My son, he's in the second grade, and he has some problems socializing. And I think that he's on the Asperger's syndrome. I tried to, I'm still working on his speech and I'm trying to diagnose him, but I reach out to school and I search for some kind of help, like social groups or in speech therapy. And at the school where like the people there were watching him for a little bit. I had a meeting with the group of psychologists, social worker, assistant principal, and they said that since my son is not falling behind with his academics, we cannot get any help from school. And I said, yes, for now he's not, but I don't want to wait for any bullying, which already took place, or other social problems with him to fall into the behind with his academics and then look for like bigger solutions. So I wonder if there's anything I can do now. After that, they said no. Is there any other step for me?
Okay, so you went through the request to get an evaluation, they evaluated him, and then they told you he's not eligible for services. I would recommend going and getting a private evaluation and having him, having that diagnosis on there. Asperger's can also be called autism. Yes. So I would recommend getting a private evaluation and bringing that to the school to see if they can do a reevaluation.
Right, but is there any way to request social groups or any other activities that would encourage him with the socialization with other kids, because this is his biggest problem?
So you can ask the school to provide maybe doing some work with the social worker and maybe other kids that are receiving, but if he doesn't have an IEP, they don't have to give him social work services. Yes, I would just maybe reach out to the teachers and kind of ask them to do more socialization with him, but if it's not in the IEP, the school doesn't have to provide social work services.
Because they say like it doesn't have anything to do with his academics, they cannot do it, they don't really care. So
yeah, so sometimes if when they do the evaluation and they see that they're not like failing classes and they're doing really good, sometimes that's part of the data. That's why I said maybe get a private evaluation for your student and then bringing that back to the school.
And then they will have to do something about it.
They don't have to, but if they see a diagnosis from like a private evaluation, then they might redo their evaluation and start the process over again.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, so I just have a general question about the IEP process. When during the IEP process should a school district be giving information to parents about other options regarding like homebound or other placement options? Does that make sense? I have a unique situation, and I'm kind of wondering, I just want to make sure the parents understand that the school placement is not the only option that the parents have, and so I don't know that it's being communicated.
It's probably not being communicated because that's something that a parent would ask for. So, but the school district should be giving you all the placement options at the time. But like homebound, they won't really recommend if your student can be attending school. So if you have a unique situation, maybe we could talk about it after. But they won't tell you about homebound at a like initial IEP meeting, just because the goal is to have your student in the school and be in the general education setting as much as possible. Someone else had a question? Thank you.
Bueno, yo hablo en español. Ok, para entrar en el IEP hay una cantidad de procesos, los 60 días y todo esto, pero ya un niño cuando está en el high school, en el caso de mi hijo que está en el high school, la transición vamos a decir, a lo regular, tenemos algunas agencias o personas encargadas que nos ayuden también en esa transición. Porque no sé si me entiendes, así como evaluamos toda una junta e insertamos al niño desde su escolaridad, ¿cómo es la transición hacia la salida? Pues, o sea, sí, ¿cómo es la transición hacia la salida? Porque yo estoy en ese proceso y estoy un poco perdida. Estaba clara en el proceso cuando él estaba en la elemental y pasamos al high school. Ha sido bien diferente, el trato inclusive es diferente, sí, porque claro, están transicionándolo, están tratando de que el niño se inserte en el proceso normal. No es igual que la elemental, es muy diferente. Eh, pero, pero pregunto, o sea, ¿va a haber una junta que me van a decir, mira, sí está listo para su vida regular o termina su seniors y ya, pues, o sea, ¿a quién le pregunto? ¿Estamos listos o no estamos listos?
So her question is, her student is in high school, and if there's a process kind of to get ready to transition out of an IEP after graduation, like what does that process look like? Do they just stop the IEP and you're ready, or she wants to know, is there a meeting, something like that, to say you're done with an IEP or not done with an IEP, right? Okay, so once they get into the high school age, they should be having part of their IEP is a transition plan. In that transition plan, they interview your student. They say, what do you want to do? Like, what kind of jobs do you like? What are your interests outside? And so they do interviews, and they have a transition plan that's in place for this purpose, to get ready for exiting high school and going into, the adult real world. And so the teacher should be helping him and guiding him to figure out what his goals are after high school. Does he want to go to college, community college? Does he want to go to a work or trade school? That should all be part of the plan and in the IEP. Have they not done that with you yet, or with your student?
Recién estamos ahorita, él está en el 10º y por ser primario tenemos supervisión. Y sí están preguntando qué quieres hacer, qué piensas, porque ya él ahorita se incorpora en la reunión.
Yes.
Sí, ya se incorpora en la reunión, pero sí entiendo que le están preguntando qué quieres, cómo lo quieres, pero yo veo que para la inserción es como que es como más ayuda, pero para la salida como que ¿qué es lo que tú quieres hacer? Es como muy propio de lo que el niño quiera, ¿no?
Yeah. So she's saying that they already started with her student who's in 10th grade, and she's just wondering like how they set him up for leaving. There's a lot of preparation that goes into having an IEP and starting an IEP, but not so much on the end.
Y siento que eso le crea como cierta ansiedad, porque él me pregunta, bueno, ¿por qué ahora no me van a ayudar? Pues yo quiero ir a la universidad. Y yo le digo, sí, pero va a ser, entonces soy yo lo que le estoy diciendo, va a ser diferente, es un poco más tu responsabilidad, y entonces estoy como presionándolo adicional a lo que tiene en el colegio, porque hay una realidad diferente cuando pasa un college o una universidad o una vocacional, o sea, ya hay una responsabilidad mayor. Entonces,
Yeah.
Un poco eso, saber qué otras organizaciones nos pueden ayudar en esa transición de manera más profesional.
And so she's saying that it causes anxiety because it puts it more on the student, and she feels that they're kind of like stepping away and kind of placing it all on him. So they shouldn't be stepping away. They should still be providing all the services that he's been getting on his IEP and really supporting him. But because he is going to leave soon, he's on his journey to leave soon, they're trying to set him up for knowing what he wants to do after. So it is an anxious process, but it is the process. And so he's still in 10th grade, so he still has a couple years left, and he can change it. He can say, oh, I don't want to do this anymore, and he can change it on his plan, and it's not set in stone. So if he says something in your upcoming meeting, that's not what it doesn't have to be that next year. He can always change, and he'll learn that as he's going through the next couple of years as well. Yeah, and if he's having anxiety, maybe going with a social worker, and asking for that type of service, or maybe peer groups with other students that are in his classes that are going through the transition plan as well. Yes. Somebody else had a question.
But they can still until 22 years old, right?
Yes.
The education is continuous. It's not really finished high school, so they have the opportunity to stay in school until 22, right?
Yes, they do have the opportunity to stay in school until 22 years old. They'd just be like in a transition program. So they'd finish senior year and then they'd be in a different setting. So they wouldn't be with like the seniors anymore. They'd be in a different type of setting, and it's called a transition program. Sometimes schools have their own. Sometimes they go to different schools to attend that program. So if that's something that he's interested in, I can give you some resources.
Sin embargo, por lo menos he estado averiguando y por lo menos los City College tienen los departamentos, como dice la profesora de Disability Resource Center. Entonces, no sé, otras universidades sí lo tienen, pero sí he estado averiguando y en algunos casos lo tienen. La pregunta que no sé
Es que lo están
¿cómo
grabando,
llego allá?
necesitan.
O sea, ¿me van a dar un documento? ¿Cómo llego? ¿No? Entonces, yo me imagino que será por su historial.
I have a question. So I know this child that he was diagnosed with autism, and he received services until second grade, I think, but he's going to third grade. But they're removing most of the services. Is that they can do that, or?
Can take off services if the school team sees that he may not need it anymore and he's doing good without them. But if they're taking off most of the services, it could be a little bit concerning. So I would just kind of question that with the IEP team. Maybe having an advocate present. So usually advocates know, they're really familiar with special education law and the process, and they can attend IEP meetings with the parent. Are you the parent or is someone else?
Somebody else.
Somebody
And I think they just leave speech for the child.
Okay.
But they remove like I think what was it, like physical therapy and OT and what else? Social worker, I guess. Yeah.
So things like physical therapy and occupational therapy, those sometimes get taken off and put back on depending on the needs of the student. So if he didn't need occupational therapy anymore, they probably took that off. Social work is a little concerning, but I would just again question the IEP team, and if the parent disagrees with that, there's a process for them to file a state complaint if they don't disagree with the IEP team's decision.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Por ejemplo, mi hijo tiene autismo, entonces nos rigimos por las rutinas. Entonces, cuando tuvimos la junta del IEP, fue lo primero que yo les dije. Hicimos un plan y ahorita yo lo que estoy viendo es de que no están siguiendo lo que es el plan. Por ejemplo, hay días, 2, 3 veces lo han dejado sin lonche, porque la persona que tiene que suplir a la SICA siempre es diferente. Entonces no le dan el sketch del niño y yo me di cuenta porque el niño me dijo, mami, Alexis tenía hambre. Yo hablé con la SICA y me dijo, es que ellos no tienen como orden. ¿Yo qué puedo hacer en ese caso?
Okay, so she's saying that her son has autism and they agreed to a routine in the IEP meeting, but they're not following that routine, and sometimes he goes without lunch because there's not enough coverage, again with the SICA or paraprofessional. So you have a right to voice your concerns. Again, so CPS is different. There's a district representative, and I would recommend requesting that the district representative attend the meeting, because if he shouldn't be missing lunch. That's probably one of the most concerning things. But making sure that they're following the services on his IEP, because that is a legal document, so they have to follow it. And if things need to be rearranged, then they have to meet and do it. But I would recommend going to the district representative, and I have the list, so I can give you the name.
The district representative is the case manager?
No. So in CPS, again, is a little bit different. They have a case manager, and then they have an ODLSS district representative. And so they oversee your whole network, and they attend IEP meetings if the parent requests, if there's concerns going on or anything like that. So I can give you the list at the end. In CPS, no. CPS has an office of diverse learners, which is their special education department. And because CPS is so big, you can't just call the director of special education like you could with another district. So they have district representatives, and in each network there's one or two. And so they kind of like, they're in between case managers, district representatives, and then the Office of Special Education. Yeah.
¿Qué es lo que sucede cuando en la transición de elementary school to middle school o middle school a high school? La respuesta es la pérdida de los papeles. ¿Ok? Y exacto. ¿Y qué hacer los padres? En este caso esto me pasó a mí, sino, oye, lo primero que acaba de decir otra señora, que en cada escuela supuestamente, como ha dicho, tienen un plan. Cuando pase de quinto a sexto grado se sigue el plan, pero no, hay una reevaluación porque están en foja cero. Me refiero a que van a estudiarlo de nuevo y van a ver qué es lo que van a hacer. Bueno, yo he sido miembro de BIPAC de mucho tiempo y yo tuve que decirles que en qué nivel estaba mi hijo punto por punto para que ellos lo siguieran. Y así lo siguieron, pero otros padres no tuvieron la oportunidad. En este caso, el primer caso es de una de mis madres que está conmigo, que perdieron la evaluación, según ellos, y que volvían a tener que hacer la evaluación. Y entonces ese periodo es muy importante para el avance del niño. Entonces, ¿dónde podemos nosotros ver qué se puede hacer? Porque puede ser un caso, ok, pero 2 o 3 creo que ya no está bien.
So she's saying that when the students transition from like also from elementary to middle to high school, that a lot of time and documents get lost. So they end up starting over the reevaluation. They don't have data points from the past to kind of go off on. So they kind of just start over. And a lot of the times the parents are the ones that are having to say, this is where my student is at. And that's not supposed to happen. So again, if that is happening, that is legal matter. So I would get dispute resolution involved. There's occasions where sometimes they will reevaluate because it happens to be their reevaluation time. Yes, but there should still be connection between the previous IEP, and they should still have those. Those should transfer at the end of every school year to the following school year. So if they're in the same district, the school should be sending those documents to the next school, even if it's a physical paper or an electronic file. So your school should be doing that. I would recommend seeking legal help for that. It's okay.
One of my question is because in this therapeutic school I have seen that teachers don't last much there. So for example, my son has 4 different teachers in this year that he has been there. And for example, in the IEP, the teacher who was there was new. So she told me, I'm sorry, I don't know your son because I just have a few days working here. I'm just reading the report, and so I want to appreciate that you can give me time to know your son so I can advise you what is the best. But we supposed, I know that if a teacher has been working with them, they're supposed to give the report because you as a parent wants to know how is working at school. But if every time there is a new teacher, then it's something I have been having in my experience. Sometimes you don't know how much do the teacher really know your kids, or, for example, on and on, that is their excuse. I'm sorry, I'm a new teacher, and for example, I don't get any notification from the school when they have a new teacher. If it is not for myself or something, then I go and ask something at school, like I asked, can I speak with the teacher? Because I have been emailed the teacher and I haven't gotten any response. And she's like, I'm sorry, she's no longer working here. So it's something that, of course, I understand that working in special education classrooms is not easy. But sometimes I feel like they don't support us parents. Like, you really don't know what are they working, what are they doing, because if there is always someone new, their answer is gonna be, I'm sorry, I'm new and I just need time to know your kid. Then I don't know how how we can get a support from that.
So unfortunately, there is a statewide special education teacher vacancy problem, and that's something that we at the state are trying to find ways to improve that. So every district in the state is having issues with keeping teachers. Every district has high teacher vacancies, meaning that they don't have a full staff of special education teachers. So that's a problem we're seeing statewide. So fortunately, that's something that's really common right now. It shouldn't be happening, but it is happening. We don't have enough special education teachers, and we don't have enough bilingual special education teachers. So that's something that we're trying at the state to problem solve and find ways to get more teachers graduating. What I do want to tell you though is that, like I mentioned earlier, you have a right as a parent to know anything that changes about your student's education, and that includes staff changes. So your school should be notifying you that there's a new teacher and giving you that contact information so you can stay in contact with them. So. Yeah, so I would just go and make sure to tell them that I can give you, you'll have this, so you can go and take them that by law, they have to let you know at the minimum that there's a new teacher. Any other questions?
Bilingual parent liaison, and I work with IP meetings and all stuff as interpreter. And you say that the parents are the ones that request an evaluation for IEPs. And in our case, the kids are bilingual, and most of the schools say that they need time because they can be evaluated at academic level because they don't have the
staff.
No, not the staff. It's because the language it's not English. So that they say that if they are behind, it's because they are learning the language. And for us, it's like it's obvious that something is happening, even for the teacher, but they just give them time, maybe next year, and we check again. Well, they even did check. They just say that it's because the language barrier. That's it.
Yes. So we are seeing a lot of people calling in, and even staff saying that this is happening, that the school is saying it's the language and that's why they're falling behind. And so kids are either being there's some districts that are giving too many IEPs because they're saying, oh, he has a disability because he doesn't speak English. And so that's wrong. And then other districts are saying, no, he doesn't have a disability. It's because he doesn't speak English, which is also wrong. So again, by law, the student has to, so a parent can request an evaluation, and the district doesn't have to do it, but it shouldn't be based off of the language. And again, I would recommend seeking legal help for that, because that shouldn't be the reason why. They should be evaluated in that language to then see if it's the language or if they have a disability. So that's what I would recommend, maybe having an advocate or legal help to make sure that the school is at least evaluating in that language.
Thank you.
Yes.
Una última pregunta, con respecto a los papeles que recibimos de evaluación. Generalmente en mi escuela, a pesar que un porcentaje es altamente hispano, nos lo dan en inglés. ¿Cómo podemos pedir respetuosamente que se nos dé en español? Si bien es cierto, hay algunas reglas que ni en español la podemos entender, necesitaríamos más información acerca de las escalas que ellos utilizan, ¿no? Es bien duro, tanto en español y pienso peor en inglés, para saber qué exactamente es lo que nos están informando, porque hay algunas confusiones incluso en inglés, que no ves si esto te lo viste aquí, esto está igual, y por qué son tantas las diferencias entre evaluador y evaluador, ¿no? Me refiero a social worker, etcétera, special education.
So she's asking in regards to documents, how she can respectfully ask for the documents to be in their native language. Again, that's by law. They have to be giving it to you in your native language. The only thing I would say is that at the beginning of the year, at the beginning of the time that you enroll your student, you fill out a home language survey. On the home language survey, sometimes people will put that they do speak English, because they'll say like, oh, my daughter who also lives in the home speaks English. And so if you accidentally put English, they're gonna give them to you in English. So they're not, it's like a loophole, like they got saved and they don't have to give them to you. But if you don't understand it and you messed up on that language survey, you can go and tell them that you don't understand the language and they have to give you the documents.
Pero anteriormente lo que dijiste acerca de que ponen erróneamente que el niño está retrasado por ser hablante hispano, eso es lo mismo, por eso siempre ponen el idioma español como un recurso de atraso. O sea, generalmente también en mi distrito ponen que está atrasado al comienzo, no porque habla español, home language Spanish, no both, Spanish and English, pero siempre te ponen, tengo 3 niñas y eso es lo que es. En mi caso de mi último hijo, que es el que necesita, que está con IEP, él le pusieron también que se hable en la casa español, es por lo tanto es el motivo por el cual está atrasado.
So she's saying that in her students' IEPs, it says that speaking Spanish is the reason for the disability, and so they should not be doing that, and so. And so for the way the IEP is written, I would remember the parent concerns page. Say, I know that that's not the reason why my student has a disability. Make sure it's in the concerns page. And then for the second part, they have to give them to you in Spanish. Yeah, so I would just go keep pushing. I know that it's hard. You shouldn't have to keep pushing as a parent, but they have to give them to you in Spanish.
Thank you.
Acerca de la compañera que está diciendo, yo llevo 5 años, año tras año, pidiendo los papeles precisamente en español. O cada evaluación, o a veces cada 2 veces al año que se hacen las juntas, yo pido. He hablado con la directora, he hablado con el director de educación especial, con la que me traduce, y me dicen que no tienen quien traduzca. Pero ahora que ya nos está usted comentando de que tenemos el derecho, entonces sí lo tenemos, pero si ellos, o sea, en mi caso yo ya lo he pedido, entonces ¿cómo yo puedo? Yo como mamá a veces sé lo que quiero, pero no sé cómo explicarme ante ellos, o no sé cuál sea a mí mi, como para defender a mi hijo en otro, o sea, como que se necesita más como más juntas para saber qué es lo que podemos hacer más. Porque si, dice usted, nos tienen que dar esas hojas en español, y si yo las pido y dicen que no, entonces, ¿qué se puede hacer más?
So she's saying that she has been going through this where the school doesn't give her the documents in Spanish or provide translation. And so she wants to know, what can she do? She's already spoken to the team, the principal, the special education director, so like what's next? So there's advocates, again, that I mentioned earlier. You can take those to your meetings, but you can also file a state complaint. And I know I mentioned that a few times, so I can pull up that website so you could see how to find the form. But I would recommend seeking legal help, because they have to be providing interpreter services and translated documents. The only thing I would ask is, if the home language survey does say English, just by you accidentally did that a long time ago, you filled it out once a long time ago, that's probably, they could be saying no to that, but we can check on that after the meeting.
So parents advocating?
I can pull it up.
A mí lo que me han indicado de ese formato
I'll look for it right now, and then I can give it. It's on the parent education, the QR code that I had up. It leads you to this page. It sends you to. It sends you to this page, parent guardian information, and then it also gives you the parent guide, and it's all in Spanish as well. So you can go through in Spanish or English. And then I'll find the advocates in just a second. Does anybody else have any other question? So the QR code that I shared.
Quería preguntarle. Ajá.
Con el teléfono.
Con el teléfono. Quería preguntarle si una vez que podamos conseguir los papeles en español puede ser retroactivo. Me refiero a que podamos tener siquiera por lo menos desde que ha estado en IP, alguna pequeña información para poder ver los avances, ¿no? En general.
So she wants to know if the school does finally give her the translated documents, can she get them from the current one and all the ones that weren't given to her in the past? And they should do that. Thank you. Any other questions? No? Yes. Do you know how they can watch the recording after? I can ask. I'm not sure how. It might be on the website after. I'm not sure. But yeah. Any other questions? Sí.
Porque pues no puedo reclamar porque no tiene esto y el otro cuando no tienen estos maestros calificados. So yo sí quiero hacer una queja al Estado.
Sí, okay.
Igual, sino también demandar a la escuela. Pues no sé yo como padre, pero son muchos padres que están ahí.
So she's saying that in her specific case, they didn't have a special education teacher, a bilingual specialist, or a bilingual special education teacher. So her student went without services for the whole year. So she's looking for how to file a state complaint. So I can pull that. That's going to be on our website. It's a form that you fill out. It's when you go to ISB. This is our website, isbe.net, isbe.net. And then you go to our special education. Down here in the middle column, is the complaint investigation process. So here are going to be the forms in all the languages.
Lugar sea, Northern District of Illinois y Eastern. So hicieron un settlement agreement, so ese documento lo podría servir para pedir la traducción en ese idioma. Eso es por el juez que lo dictó. So podría compartir.
So she's talking about a settlement. CPS was they were sued for not having interpreters and translators at IEP meetings. And so there's a settlement going on both with the state and CPS if you go to CPS. But they're currently working on developing a program so that more people can get certified. So they're currently, they had a settlement, and so more staff is going to start being certified, but they're developing that program right now. The parent guide to special education services, the QR code that I put up, it'll take you to it. It's a state of Illinois, So it's the special education parent guide to special education, and it's both in English and in Spanish. And it goes through your dispute resolution, so your rights to how to file a state complaint, It gives you all the timelines for all the different processes that you will go through and all the different information. I definitely recommend going through that. Again, so the QR code that you scanned will take you to the page where it's at.
Está muy bueno because it has el ejemplo de cómo hacer las cartas,
Mhm.
de los procedimientos de la carta cuando tú quieres hacer un complaint o cuando quieres agradecer. Está muy bueno.
Yeah, it gives you like prompts and stuff on how to start complaints and things like that. Okay, anything else? All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know I said I was going to talk to a couple of you guys, and I can give you the name of the district representative. Nomás lo busco. ¿En qué escuela?